Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Kamma Daf Gimel. Today's daf is sponsored by Rabbi Lisa Malik in loving memory of her father, David Malik, David ben Aharon Tzvi Hirsch V'Shendel. It is so fitting that we're having the Shiur from Masechet Kiddushim and Seder Nashim on this day, which I'll invite you to come later this afternoon, evening, whatever time it is by you, because it was in my dad's honor that I made the commitment to participate in this Daf Yomi cycle while I was saying for Kaddish for him in 2019 twin. Daily spiritual practice of Daf Yomi, which initially overlapped with my avot period, continues to keep my father's memory alive. Thank you, Rabbanit Michelle, for your meaningful, inspirational presence in my daily life during times of personal and communal grief. Okay, we're going to get started now with our daf. So we started yesterday, our Masechet, with the avot melachot. There was a little bit of confusion, which ultimately in the next little while, not today, but we will get there. So we will get to figuring out, and as part of the mystery of, we had these four melachot, the four avot. Sorry, I keep confusing the name avot and melachot because to me in my head, avot and melachot go together. Four avot, four main categories. Shiur, an animal. Bor, something, a pit I dig in the middle of the street. Mav'e, which we're not sure. It doesn't mean tooth of an animal, like eating the food, which then why is that not included in shiur? Or does it mean adam, which is a person damages? And then we have hev'er, which is a fire. And then we had this other braita that said there's three avot, which obviously are only connected to an animal, which is shein, regel, and keren, right? Or keren, regel, and keren, shein, and regel, which is, right, the goring, which we discussed yesterday, and we got to the source of that, the teeth, right, the biting, and the regel. How all these connect together, we're going to get back to this over time and try to figure out, depending on how you understand mav'e. If you understand that mav'e is adam, then it's very simple. Shiur includes keren, shein, and regel, right? And then mav'e is adam. Okay, if you don't think that, and you think that shein is separate, then what is shiur, and how does this all work out? So we're going to have to deal with this, at least understanding how the Bavli understands all this. Okay, what we did yesterday was we compared. This is typical in the beginning of a Masechet, as we said, to compare the avot by Shabbat and the avot in Tum'ah, and show that the avot, the main categories in Tum'ah, they get less strict as they go down. Lower category passes on impurity less than the top category. When it comes to Shabbat, the toladot are exactly the same. So Rav Papa, then they asked, what about here? And Rav Papa said, some yes and some not, right? Some are the same and some are weaker. So now the Gemara tried to figure out which is which. So we started with keren. We said, okay, keren is definitely the same. So we came to the conclusion. Therefore, it must be shein and regel. And that's where we left off at the end of the daf. And in order to get to what are the toladot of keren, not that you really needed this, but the Gemara first, and they're going to do the same thing today, first said, where do we see that keren is a main category? And the main category really means it's mentioned in the Torah. So where do we see that keren is the main category mentioned in the Torah? And we prove that yigach was keren. We're going to do the same thing for shein and regel. And then we're going to show, how do we see that toldotehen are not kayotze bahem? Okay, that the toladot there, which the Gemara concluded, are not the same. We're going to see, we're actually going to see, I should already warn you, they actually are the same. And then we're going to have to keep going through the list of all of the avot that we know in Nizikim that we've just discussed and go one by one and say, are the toladot the same? And in fact, we're going to see that we're going to get to the conclusion that all the toladot seem to be the same as the av. And then we're going to try to figure out, well, then what was Rav Papa talking about? And it's going to take us almost to the end of today's daf to get to an answer for that. So starting with shein v'regel hechaktive. So the first thing we do about shein v'regel, once we've concluded, in others, again, this is by process of elimination, but it's not going to work because we're now going to go through shein v'regel and we think that they're the ones that don't have toladot the same as the avot, but it's not going to be true. So 4 lines from the bottom of Bet Amud Bet. Shein v'regel hechaktive. Ditanya. V'shilach zeh haregel. V'cheinu omer m'shachei regel hashor b'chamur. We're now going to take this pasuk that we saw last class, and we'll see it again now, which is on Shmuel Kaf Bet Pasuk Dalet. It's in the study guide. Okay, recommended choose the study guide today. It also organizes the page. We'll see if I can keep up with doing it on a daily basis. I'm going to try, but not always possible. But right now we have. So Kiyav El Ish Sadeh Okeren V'Shilachet Be'iro Be'er B'Steachel. So a person, right? It's unclear exactly what this means. Kiyav Er Ish Sadeh Okeren, when he destroys, I guess it means to be causes a field to be consumed. V'shilachet be'iro. So now there's 2 verbs here. He sends his be'iro, okay, which seems to be sends his animal out to eat or to destroy. We don't know in what way to destroy. Right now we just said shilach is actually regel. He sends his animal out and his animal tramples on the ground. Ubi'er b'stechel. and the animal destroyed, consumed a different field. Now, what they're going to basically say is shilach is talking about rega, by the animal trampling on someone else's field and destroying it by trampling. Bi'er is by tooth, by eating. Okay? So, the whole point is why, and we're going to deal with this for a while. It's going to take us about halfway down to the next, into Amud Aleph here, about why are these two words, why one is shein and one is regel, and then we're going to have a whole back and forth about this. But the main thing is already said in the first line, but then they're going to have a lot of discussions about it. So the first thing is shilach zeharegel, as it says, mishalchei regel ashor v'chamor. So you see in this pasuk that sending connects with the word regel and connects with animals, regel of animals. So we're going to basically say, because it says that root shalach in connection with the legs of an animal, we're going to assume the word shilach in that sentence means that it's damage done by the animal trampling. Ubi el zo hashen v'chein u'amel ka'asher yiva'el hagalal ad tumo. It's a bit of a confusing pasuk what exactly galal means. There's different interpretations. We'll go with one, which is this pasuk is talking to Yeravam, and it's basically saying Yeravam ben Nevat, the one who, the first, when the kingdom was split and he was a bad king, he is going to be destroyed the same way that a galal destroys. Okay, the galal we're going to say is a tooth. I'll explain how you get to tooth in a minute. The way a tooth consumes food, basically, okay, and completely consumes it, wipes it out. That's the way you're going to be wiped out. Galal comes from the language, at least again, there's different interpretations. We'll go with one, which is, Rashi says, it's a shein shepamim migule upamim mechuse. It's sometimes revealed and sometimes hidden, right? You can, as I'm talking, you could see. Sometimes you see my teeth, sometimes you don't. Depends what words I'm using. So that's what it means. That's where we see galal is teeth, and yiva'el is said in connection with teeth. So just like shilach was said in connection with regel, bi'er was said in connection with teeth. So Amar, now we're going to go into the first one, and we're going to basically do something. We're going to have a whole line of questioning on the first source. And then this, by the way, was a braita, okay? I don't know if you pay attention to the words. Detanya was in a braita. So the braita taught us shilach is regel from the pasuk, and bi'er is shein from the pasuk. The Gemara is going to ask about both of them. Why do you need a pasuk for that? You could have figured it out. You could have intuited it. Okay, how so? Well, Amar, v'shilach zo regel, v'cheinu omer v'shalchei regel ashor v'chamor. They're just quoting that line. We're now going to deal with regel. Then we're going to do the exact same thing with shein. Talmud katav rachmana mishalchei regel ashor v'chamor. It sounds like from this braita, if it hadn't brought you this pasuk, mishalchei regel ashor v'chamor, you wouldn't have known that v'shilach is regel. But why not? You could have figured out by process of elimination. Halav haki b'mayim mukmala. What else would you have said it is? Let's assume you have ki gach, which we already learned is goring. Goring is with your horns. Then you have ubiel, which we know is shein, because we just proved it from a pasuk. Well, if that's the case, what could v'shilach be if not regel? What else is left? Right? They're making an assumption here that they didn't see the psukim and decide, oh, regel is an av malacha because it said v'shilach, and v'shilach is connected with regel. What they were trying to do is, where do you find a source? We know there's three. We know there's keren, shein, and regel. That's a definite. The question is, where do you find them in the psukim? Well, you could have said v'shilach is regel just by process of elimination. So let's read it inside. I keren k'tiv. If you're going to say it's keren, we already had ki gach in the earlier psukim. I shein k'tiv. If it's teeth, we already have that from ubiel. So the only thing v'shilach could be, assuming you have the pasuk by shein, is regel. So you don't need a pasuk to prove it. To which the Gemara says, no, you do. Because if you didn't have a pasuk, you might have thought the following. Okay, it's one of those, you need it, because if you didn't have it, you might have thought. What might you have thought? You would have thought, it could be, there's two verbs in this pasuk. There's vishilach, you send, and there's uviel, you consume. So you could have thought, what does to consume mean? To completely consume something. What does vishilach mean? Well, you send your animal to the field, it eats, it just doesn't consume it entirely. That's what we're going to suggest. Right? So both are about shein. Ha de mikalya karna, ha de lo mikalya karna. One is where the keren, now here keren is not the same keren as before. Keren before was horns. Keren also means the principle. So it could be that, again, ubi el would be where the animal ate the entire object, okay, the entire food. There's nothing left of it. There's another way that you could destroy it with shein. The animal starts eating and either spits it out, so it's still there, it's just not entirely consumed. Okay, but it's damaged, or does something with his teeth and ruins it, but doesn't entirely finish it. So you might have thought v'shilach. Now, which one is which? Ubi er, it's entirely consumed. So v'shilach would be if you didn't entirely consume it. Now, they say the following. Okay, so that's why you needed to say v'shilach is regel. So now they say, okay, well, let's take this train of thought farther. V'hashtadu kimna regel. Now that you said v'shilach is regel and ubi er is shein. Now, what does bi'er sound like? Entirely consumed. Now, are you going to be liable if your animal eats but doesn't entirely consume someone else's produce? Yes, you are. But where are you going to get that from? Shein de lo makar yakana minayin. Minalan. If ubi el sounds like entirely consumes, then how are you going to know if the animal doesn't entirely consume it? It's still going to be you're still going to be liable for that. So the answer, well, notice what's in the pasuk. There's v'shilach, which is regel, which is trampling. There's ubi el, which is eating, now consuming. Which now you might think that means to consume it entirely. But since it's juxtaposed in the verse next to regel, then we're going to assume it's just like regel. Dumia de regel. It's just like regel, which is what? Now, when you trample on something, do you entirely consume it, destroy it? No. You just partially destroy it, right? It's still there. It's just trampled and ruined. So ma regel, loshna mekal yarkana, veloshna lo mekal yarkana. Since it's right next to regel in the pasuk, and regel, it doesn't make a difference. Whether it's entirely consumed or not, you're still going to be liable. And therefore, you're going to learn, even by eating, it's going to be the same. Okay, that was our first train of thought. What we wanted to say is, we had this pasuk v'shilach is regel. Why did you need the pasuk? You could have figured it out otherwise, because what else is left? To which they say, no, both could have been shein. It just could have been two different cases of shein. Once we said that's why you need regel, okay, well then how do we know the second case of shein? Because it's like regel. Okay, we're going to do the exact same thing in the reverse. Amar ubi erzo hashem, v'cheinu omer kasher v'hagalala tumo. Same pasuk we saw before. This is just a quote from the Bright. So again, Talmud katav rachmana kasher v'hagalala tumo. Halav hachi b'mayu kimnala. Right? It sounds like the whole reason is because you have a pasuk. But if not the pasuk, what else could it have been? E karen ktiv. If you want to say it's karen goring, we already have that from the previous, from the earlier pasukim. E regel. If it's regel, we already have that from v'shilach. So the only thing left for ubi er must be shein, to which they're going to obviously say, no, you could have thought both were regel. And now we're going to have to distinguish two cases of regel. You might have thought v'shilach ubi er is both regel. Now, what's the difference? V'shilach sounds like, okay, we learned, anyone who learned Kiddushin knows that we talked a lot about shlichut, sending your animal, right? If I send my animal to your field to eat, to trample on your produce and ruin it, obviously I'm going to be liable. But maybe if the animal went on his own or her own, maybe I'm not liable, right? I didn't send it. Why should I be liable? So you might have thought maybe what the pasuk is telling you, not only v'shilach, where it means I sent the animal, but uvi el is maybe if the animal goes on his own. Hada azami mela, hada shalosh shiluche, right? One is the animal goes on its own, and one is I sent the animal. Kamash malan. That's why it has to tell you, no, don't think they're both regel and different scenarios of regel. No, one is regel, one is shein, and that's what you need the pasuk for, and the Bright to tell you that. So now the Gemara says, but wait, same thing we did before. Now that you said it's shein and v'shilach is regel, it sounds like only if I send my animal will I be liable for regel, because it says v'shilach and I sent it. So, regel, the azlam imela minal, how do we know that if the animal goes on its own, and they assume this is obviously true, I'm responsible for my animal no matter what. Even if I didn't send my animal, but my animal goes out and damages your property, of course I'm liable, because my whole responsibility is to watch my animal. I have an animal and I know that this is typical damage, that an animal might go into someone else's field and trample on it. So I'm responsible for that as well. But how would you know that from the pasuk? The pasuk only says regel in the context of the word v'shilach, which means I sent it. So again, they're going to say the same as before, dumia de shein. Well, it's in the pasuk right next to shein. Now, shein, it says uviel. It doesn't say I sent my animal to eat in your field. So therefore, ma shein loshna shel chashiluche loshna da'azal mimela. Doesn't matter if I sent my animal or ate it anyway. Either which way, I'm liable. Af regel loshna shel chashiluche loshna azna mimela. Okay. Now, you think we're at the end here, but we're still not. Remember why we got here. All we came here to do was which case are the toladot different from the avot. Okay, and we assume now it's shein v'regel, although I already told you that's not going to be the case. But we haven't even gotten close to that yet, because all we're trying to do right now is say, how do we know that shein and regel are avot melachot from avot nizikin? I'm going to keep mistaking this. Are avot nizikin, right? Main categories of damages in the Torah. Okay, because for whatever reason they decide that once they're already introducing it, once we're getting to it, let's just explain what this is in the first place and where we get it from. So now we're still there, because so far we did, right? We said pasuk to prove shein, pasuk to prove regel. Now we want to know, why do we need each pasuk, right? If one pasuk exists theoretically, we could have figured out the other by process of elimination. But in the end, they show why not. Okay, because each one could have been just on shein, or each one could have been, both words could have been just on regel. Now they say, okay, well, we're still not done. I told you this was going to take us, we're already more than halfway through Amud Aleph. We haven't even gotten to our main point yet. Now they're going to say, wait a minute. Now, you don't yet know why they're saying this, but what they're going to say is, why does the Torah even use two verbs for both these things? Because theoretically, you could have just used the word v'shilach and learned both regel and shein, okay, both trampling and eating. How so? Well, because the word v'shilach comes in psukim connected with regel, as we saw already. Okay, mashma regel, dichtiv, mishalche regel, hashor v'chamor. And mashma shein, also there's a pasuk, dichtiv. Okay, it's a pasuk from Sefer Dvarim. Shein behemot ashalach bam. This is in all the tochacha, all the bad things that are going to happen. No, it's actually in Hazinu. Sorry, it's in Hazinu. Shein behemot ashalach bam. What do you see here? Shein goes with shiluach. I'm going to send. Okay, the shein of animals. Here you have it. Okay, that's pretty clear. So v'shilach indicates both regel and shein. So why do you need uvi'il? Now, this is going to, okay, so now they're going to say, ilav krayetera. Well, if you didn't have another pasuk and just one verb, what might you have thought? Havamina oha, oha. One verb seems to indicate one action. So you would have thought either it was regel or it was shein. You would not have thought both. Now, you would have said either. Okay, these are your two possibilities. You would have said, if you had to choose one or the other, well, there's logic to choose regel and there's logic to choose shein. We're going to basically show each one has some sort of, you would think it would be more strict for this reason. You'd think you'd be more liable because of this. Oh, regel, dehezeko matsui. Well, regel is something that happens very often. Animals walk and they trample. So it would have been pretty clear that it was regel, because that's the most common thing that an owner should expect is going to happen. Oh, shein deyesh hanaha le'ezeko. Or it could be teeth, because animals enjoy that. Okay, now, what's the point of the fact that the animals enjoy? It's a good question. So if the animals enjoy, maybe that means it's more common, even though it doesn't say hezeko matsui, but maybe you would think, since the animal's going to enjoy it, right? Normally, people don't always damage unless they have intent, even though it's an animal, but because they're enjoying it, maybe it's more likely they'll damage. Or you could actually say, who benefits from the animal eating? Well, I, as the owner, benefit, because if my animal eats in your field, I have to pay less money. So it could be because I benefit. Maybe it's more likely that I'm going to have to pay, because now they ate your food. I don't need to feed them. I don't need to pay money to feed them. And therefore I'm benefiting. So all the more so I should have to pay. Whereas if it tramples, I didn't get any benefit from it. So it's a good question whether the benefit is to the animal or the benefit is to the owner. Either which way, they each have a reason. And therefore you might have thought, right, but what's the whole point here? The point is, why did it need two verbs? Because if it only had one, you might have thought maybe only shein or maybe only regel, and each one for their own reason. To which the Gemara says, that's not really a valid answer, because you could say, since each one has a stringency that would be the reason, you would think the owner would be liable in this case. Well, then since they're both about equal, because each one has some sort of stringency in it, or then what might you have said? You would have, the only conclusion you could get to, you'd think, oh, well, is it regel? Is it shein? It must be both, because since I can't figure out which one, it must be including both. And then again, we're back to square one. Why do we have a square one in this little section? Which is, why do we have two verbs to say the same thing when you really could have learned both from one word? So they say itzrich. Now, why do you need it? And this goes back to what we saw earlier. If you only have one word, v'shilach, what might you have thought? You might have thought then only back to what we thought before. maybe you're only responsible when you sent the animal into their field. Avalaz lamimela, but if the animal goes on its own low, then maybe you wouldn't be responsible. Kamashmalan. That's why we needed the two verbs. So in the end, the two verbs are one for Shane, one for Regel, but also really to teach you this other issue. I mean, really, you can combine it with the previous, which is also could have said Ubiel. So number one, even if you don't consume it entirely, you're going to be responsible for both. And also, if you didn't even send the animal, but the animal went on its own, that's why you need both these verbs. Okay, that was a very long-winded way to get to basically a very simple conclusion, which is Vishilach is Regel, Ubiel is Shane. Okay, now we get to our main point, which is, are the toladot kayotze behen? Are they the same or different? So let's get to the toladot. Toladat Hashem mahi. What's a toladat Hashem? Nitchachacha bekotel lahanata. An animal rubs up against a wall for enjoyment purposes. Vitinfa perot lahanata. Roll. The animals like to roll on the ground. It's it's good for their body. It feels good. So they roll on produce. Okay, and because it's soft, whatever it is, it's enjoyable for the animal. And while they do that, they damage, right? They get the produce all dirty. Okay, you have to imagine it's a kind of dirt that won't come off. I don't know exactly what the reality is here, but that's basically what happened here. Now, this is damage done where the animal is enjoying what they're doing, right? And while they're doing that, they're damaging. That's shame. That's eating, basically. So, Mishna Shen, I see you're saying it sounds like it's the squashing the fruit, but I don't think so, because it's tinfa is usually to make it dirty. So that's why I think it is dirt and not squashing. I think squashing would be maybe more like trampling it. Anyway, I'm not sure. But anyway, well, now, what do we know about Shane? Let's go back to the Av, the main category, and the Toladot, the subcategory. So Shane, there's benefit to the animal's enjoying. It's your property, and you're supposed to watch over it. Well, Haninami, same thing with all these other things. Yesh Hana Lehezekan, right? They're rubbing against that wall, they're enjoying it, and they're destroying the wall in the process. And it's your possessions, and you're supposed to be watching over it. Therefore, Ela Toladad Kashen Kashen. So I don't understand why you would be any less responsible for this kind of damage. In which case, it can't be Shane. Well, if it can't be Karen and it can't be Shane, then what must it be? Regel. Well, Rav Papa, so therefore, again, process of elimination, he must have been talking about toladot de regel. It's interesting right now that they're only assuming there's these three, right? Because they're working off the Braita. In a minute, when they reject regel, they're going to then start back on our Mishna, right? They're going to go to not Shiur, because we dealt with that, the three of Shiur, but we're going to go to bor, mav'e, and hevel. Okay, I'm going to go through the list. So toladot de regel maihi. What's a toladot? Hizika begufa derech hilucha. Okay, while you're walking, I was thinking often, so let's just assume the animal's walking. Now, animals are probably, they're kind of big and bulky, or it could be even small animals. But as they're walking, their body pushes up. Instead of trampling with their feet, their body bumps into something and breaks it. Okay, so that would be one. Sa'ara derech hilucha. Its hair gets entangled with a vessel, let's say, and they drag it along the street and it breaks. Bishlip she'aleha. This could be either a rope or a burden that's on it. I was thinking when you walk on a bus or, especially like in the airport when there's a lot of people and you have a backpack and sometimes you knock into someone, they get really angry at you, like you knocked me with your backpack, right? Like that could happen on an animal also. They have a big burden that's jutting out from the sides of the animal and it knocks into something and breaks it. The bit that's in its mouth, like it could be the what do you call it? I can't think of the word, but what you put on a horse, right, around its mouth to be able to pull it. The zug shebetzavara, the bell around its neck, right? It's a bit. I was trying to come up with another word for it, but okay. Not everyone knows what a bit is. That's why I was trying to describe it, but okay. A zug shebetzavara, the bell on its neck. Okay. All those things, those are all like reg. Okay. They're all toladot because it's what's similar about them. We're going to read it right now. Mishna regel, the heze komatsui. It's very common, right? Like I said, you're walking with a backpack, you bump into somebody, you don't realize, right? It's very common when the animal's walking that something could get entangled into something else, something could push against something. All those are very common. And so this defines regel. First, we're just talking about regel itself. As it tramples, it walks, it tramples something. Heze komatsui is very common. And again, it's always going to be this. Mamlucha was your property. You're responsible to watch over your property. Same thing with all the ones in this list. Ela toladot de regel kiregel. So that can't be the one Rav Papa was talking about. Rav Papa. Well, let's go next in line. A toladot de bor. As I said, those were the three of Shiur. Now we're moving on to bor. By the way, I didn't mention this, but you can. I forgot to talk about this, but in the Mishna, there's clearly a literary structure being used here. Shiur, bor, rhyme, right? Mav'e, hever sound the same. There's like a bit of a play on words, which might explain why mav'e was used when it's a very unclear term and nobody really knows what mav'e means. Could be that it was used for a literary device here of connecting the words, which again helps you to remember. It's a mnemonic. Shiur, bor, mav'e, hever, right? Even bor has the bed, it connects with the mav'e, and then that connects with the hever. It's very, right, it's got a certain ring to it. So anyway, toladot de bor maini. So what's a toladot of bor? Well, first suggestion is the following. Ilema av asara v'toladat tisha. This reminds us of Masechet Shabbat and Sukkah and all these things where we talked about 10 tefachim, 10 handbreadths of height is usually something significant. Now, the rabbis assume, now the bor mentioned in the Torah is when your animal falls into a pit, or someone's animal falls into a pit that you dug and dies. So if the animal dies, what depth does it have to be? If an animal dies, if it's a very shallow pit and the animal, some fluke dies, that's not your responsibility because you didn't really cause the death of that animal because let's say a 5 tefachim deep bor does not generally kill an animal. But if you dug it 10 tefachim deep, then it's something that the rabbis kind of assessed, that's something that could kill an animal. 9, no. So 9 could damage an animal, could break its leg, but it's not going to die. So the rabbis assess that's what it is. So maybe av is asara and toladot is tisha, right? The av is that at 10, it will kill the animal. But if it's only 9, it'll only damage the animal. And maybe that's, right, and then you're liable for damages. Maybe since the Torah only talks about death of the bor, right, death through the pit, maybe we're talking about the difference between 10 and 9. 10 is the av, 9 is the toladot. So they say, first of all, that can't be because notice it was introduced with an ilema. If you say, well, lo tisha k'tivei below asara k'tivei, it never says in the Torah 9 or 10. That's something the rabbis came up with. Well, they say, no, that's not actually difficult because halokashya, v'hameti yelo amar rachmana. The Torah says that when the animal dies, you get the dead body of the animal, and you have to pay the value of the animal, but you can keep the carcass. In other words, let's say the animal's worth 100 when it was alive, so you pay the owner 100, and you actually get to keep the dead animal. You can sell that, so you get a little value because the owner doesn't get it back because you already paid the owner the full amount of the animal, but you get to keep the dead body anyway. The point is that the Torah, that's not really what's important. The Torah said it's a case where the animal dies. That's clear. And kimluhu Rabbanan, and the rabbis just defined what is a case where the animal will die, and you're responsible for that. Asara avde mita tisha nizikin avde mita lo avde. Right? 10 is what the rabbis assessed will cause death. So that's the one mentioned in the Torah, even though the Torah didn't talk about 9, 10. But right, in 9, it will only cause damage and not death. So the Gemara says, that's not a good explanation. And then, right, the av would be 9, the av would be 10 for death, and the toladot would be 9 for damages. But they say that's not true because these are two different categories. 10 is an av, the main category for death of an animal, right? If you killed an animal, you're responsible for its death if it's 10 deep. If it's 9 deep, you're responsible for damages, and that's an av in and of itself. So you can't say that one is an av and one is a toladot because they're two different things. One is talking about you killed an animal, one is talking about you damaged an animal. That can't possibly be. So this is not an option for what a toladot is of bor. But what is a toladot of bor? Well, depending on who you are and what you hold, but we're going to see a big machlok of Rav and Shmuel here. There's going to be 2 big machlokot of Rav and Shmuel today. If you leave something in the public domain, okay, not that you dug a pit, but you left something on the street. You left a knife, you left a big stone, you left a package, and somebody trips over it, okay, and they get hurt. Well, that is bor. Well, now they're going to say, well, it depends, okay? There's 2 possibilities. There's going to be 4 possibilities altogether, but 2 possibilities of what, when you left it there, what was your intent? Did you intend to say, I'm never coming to collect this again? I don't want this knife. I'm just sticking it in the middle of the street. Okay, not the smartest thing to do, but that's one possibility. The other possibility is I left it there temporarily and I plan to come back and take it. Okay, that means I'm still the owner of it. In the first possibility, I did what was mafkil. I made it ownerless. I'm not the owner anymore. Now, generally, what do we say about bor? Bor is a case where it's ownerless. I dug a pit in the public domain. It's not mine. I can't claim rights to a piece of public property that I dug up. It's not mine. So therefore, Ida afkirinu, if I made it ownerless, well, then for sure it's bor. Everybody agrees. Bein l'Rav, bein l'Shmuel. We don't know what they argue about yet, but they both agree hainu bor. Okay, that's bor for sure. But starting now at the top of Amabet, ida lo afkirinu. But if I didn't make it ownerless and I put my knife in the middle of Rishut Harabim and I plan to take it back next week or whenever it is, well, ila Shmuel da amar kula mibarot lamanu hainu bor. Shmuel says this is bor because what is bor? It's not like shor, because shor is something that's alive. This is not alive. It's an inanimate object. It's the same as bor, even though I still own it. Okay, that's his position. We're going to see more about this later. Not today. Il Rav da amar kula mishoro lamanu hainu shor. If it's like Rav, who says we learn everything from shor, meaning if it's still my property, it doesn't matter that it's alive or not alive. It's my property and it's damaging. That's like my shore. If my shore goes into your property or goes into the public domain and ruins your stuff, right, knocks into you on the street, I'm going to be responsible because I should have protected my animal. Well, if my knife damages you in Rishut Harabim, even though it didn't move, even though it's not animate, it doesn't matter. It's still so. Rav says this comes under shore. Okay, so now what? So what does that have to do with anything? Well, if it's shore, like Rav says, if it's a case where I kept ownership over it and Rav puts it in the category of shore, well, we already know shore is toladot kayotze bahen, right? It's the same. So that can't be Rav Papa. We're still trying to figure out where did Rav Papa say the toladot are not the same. And if you say it's bor, according to the other three possibilities, either Rav and Shmuel, where I said it was ownerless, or Shmuel, where I said it wasn't ownerless, well, again, Mishna bor shekain tchilat asiyat tolanezek. We're going to now say, what are criteria of bor? And do these toladot have the exact same criteria? Yes, they do, in which case they're going to be liable the exact same way you're liable for the bor itself. So, Mishna bor, what's unique about bor? Tchilat asiyat tolanezek. As soon as you create it, and you dig that bor in the middle of Rishut Harabim, that pit, it's immediately can damage, right? Anyone can fall in it right then. As soon as I left my knife, now tchilat asiyato means from the first moment. It doesn't mean the first moment I created the knife or bought the knife. No, it means from the moment I put the knife down in Rishut Harabim, the public right domain, well, it could damage, right? So it's the same thing. So again, ma bor, that's what's unique about bor damages. And like all the others, mamonchat, your property, right? In this case, it's a little weird because it's not exactly your property, but it was your property. You used it in the first place, and you should be protecting people from getting damage from it. So haninami, these other items that you left in the middle of the public domain are the same exact thing. And therefore, kibor. So again, we still don't have an answer to Rav Papa. What was he talking about? Where the toladot are not the same. So next on the list, they assume Rav Papa, they haven't learned their lesson yet. They keep just pushing it to the next one, even though every time we get to the next one, it's not going to work either. So let's go through the list. Let's assume it's mav'e. Okay, well now we have a big machloket by mav'e, and now we're going to see it inside. Umaynihu. Now what is mav'e? Ila Shmuel. If you're Shmuel, well, to Amar mav'e is a shame. He says mav'e is tooth, is your, the animal eating. Well, how kimna de toladot shein kashem? We already learned shein is like the toladot are exactly like the avot. Ila Rav de Amar mav'e is adam. If you say it's adam, well then my avot or my toladot. What would be the av and what would be the toladah? Itbe. Okay, what are main and what are subcategories of a person damaging? If you want to say the av is we're going to give two possibilities now. If the av is when the person's awake, they damage, and yashen, the toladah, is when they're sleeping, they damage. Well, v'hatnan, if we want to say that, it's very clear that toladot tohen kayotze behem are the same. Okay, because we're going to learn v'hatnan. It says in the Mishna further on the Masechet, Adam muad laolam bein el bein yashen. A person is always responsible for their actions, whether they're awake or whether they're sleeping. Even though I'm sleeping and I'm not really in control of what I do, if I damage your property, we're going to get to exactly when and what and how this all works, but we have a while to get there. Well, less than a month, but we will get there in a little while. Bein er bein yashem, meaning it's exactly the same. So again, same. Ela akicho v'nei. What about my spit and phlegm? Okay, I spit out, and there's going to be two possibilities. Okay, we'll go through it right now. Let's say I spit, and as my spit comes out of my mouth or my phlegm, I cough, it falls right on your shirt, and your shirt is now stained, okay, forever. So if that's the case, kochohava, that's basically, okay, let's take a better example. If I shoot an arrow, can I claim, oh, it wasn't me who killed you, it was the arrow that killed you? No, the arrow only has strength because I shot the arrow. My phlegm only ruined your shirt because I spit it out of my mouth. So therefore, it's fully my responsibility. If it's after I spit my phlegm on the floor, I didn't clean it up. Okay, it's a little gross, right? I didn't clean it up and you slipped on it. Well, what's that? Bein l'Rav, bein l'Shmuel, hainu bor. That's like leaving my knife in the middle of the public domain. I obviously was mafkir it. Okay, it wasn't like I wanted to pick up my phlegm and keep it and put it in a little jar and save it for a science experiment. No, I obviously did not intend to keep that, and therefore, even Rav and Shmuel will both agree in that case that's bor. Okay, right? Even the one who says that sometimes it could be sure, it's not going to be it's not like my property. So what do we see here? Then it's bor. So either Bain er bain yashen, it's the exact same thing. Or this kichu v'neo, either it's adam and it's the same because it came from me, or it's like bor, in which case also toladot de bor kebol. So therefore, ela toladot de mav'e kemav'e. Okay, we've now proven whether you say mav'e is shein or whether you say it's adam, clearly the toladot of mav'e are the exact same thing. So it's not mav'e. B'chi Kamma Papa, what's left? Only one left. A toladot de esh. Okay, you think we're getting to the answer, but we're not. Okay, so it must be fire. Well, what is fire? Fire means I lit a fire and the wind takes my fire, right? Or some force, right? The force of the fact that fire spread takes my fire to your property and burns your property as well. So, toladot de esh ma'ni. What is toladot of fire? Ilema, if you want to say, let's go back to the Evan Sakin or Masa, okay? Our stone, our knife, or burden. Shehinicham, right? My package. Shinicham berosh kago. Now I leave them on top of my roof. In what way? Well, naflu beruach mitsuya. If a tornado comes and I have a very heavy package on my roof and it blows my very heavy package onto your property and ruins it, I'm not responsible because that is unexpected damages. Okay, I was not supposed to expect that a tornado was coming unless the news had warned about it. Right, there was no news in those days, so whatever. Okay, no one knew this was coming. A tornado comes, that's not my fault. But if it was a package that was light enough that the wind, a regular, typical, everyday wind, could have blown that off my roof, that's like fire, right? Because it's basically, I do something in my own property in a way that it's potentially could spread to someone else's property in a very typical manner, like a fire. So that's the same as fire. But we're going to, again, have two different possibilities. Because, hechidan, now, if this knife flies off my roof with this typical wind, and lands right on you and damages you, okay? That would be Aish, okay? Because that's what fire is. It comes, and as it's moving, it damages you. And then if with this case, what would we say? Is it the same as Aish or not? Of course it's the same. Mishna Aish, right? What's with Aish? Aish is, I didn't directly do it, but there's this other force that's in it that's moving it to where it's going to damage. Just like, right, our case. And again, it's yours. You made it in your house. And you're supposed to watch it. You're supposed to contain the fire, and you didn't. So same thing with this object flying and damaging on its way down. Ella, so therefore, toladot ke'esh ke'esh. Okay? Now, if obviously, right, it doesn't actually say this, but if it fell and then damaged, well, that would be bor, basically. Because even though I didn't put it in the public domain, the fact that it flew off my roof with the common wind would basically mean that now it's as if I put it in Rishut Rabim, and then it would be bor, and again, bor is like bor. So, Rav Papa, well, now we've knocked out all the possibilities. So now the Gemara says something very odd. Well, what Rav Papa said, he was talking about toladot de reg. Toladav, trampoline. Wait a minute. How could you possibly say that? We already rejected that possibility. Regel, the Gemara says, how kimna toladot de regel keregel? We already said the toladot of regel is like regel. So how could you possibly say that when he said the toladot is not like the main category, it was talking about regel? To which the answer, it's called this. Okay, it's called the toladot of regel, but it's a different toladot than the ones we discussed. Bechatzi nezek tzrorot. Okay, you already hear from the name of it. Chatzi nezek means half damages. Now you already see we finally got to our answer. Our answer is this unique case of where you only pay half damages of tzrorot. What is tzrorot? Okay, we're going to talk a lot more about it later. This stuff, it's kind of alluding to all sorts of big machlokot or big issues that we're going to discuss throughout the Masechet. But strower, like this Rav and Shmuel machloket about what is mav'e, and Rav and Shmuel about what is bor, afkarinu, lo afkarinu. Okay, we're going to get to all these things much more in depth. This is just kind of a little taste of everything. Chatzin nezek strower is when the animal's walking, kicks pebbles, and then the pebbles cause damage. Okay, so the animal kicked the pebbles. It's already, you can see it's more indirect damage because the animal didn't trample anything themselves here. Kicked the pebble, not right, went flying and knocked a jug, right, and broke it. Okay, that's stroed, and you're only chayav chatzin nezek. And where do we learn this from? Which usually means halacha lamosh misinai. So now you see it's not an av because it wasn't in the Torah, and it's a toladav regel, which in a minute we're going to say why is it toladav regel. Okay, but it's considered a toladav regel. Let's just take that as an assumption right now, and it's not as strict because you only pay half damages. Okay, now, amai karile toladav regel. So why is it called toladav regel if it's not like regel? So the answer, l'shalem min ha'aliyah. Okay, this is another big issue that we're going to get into, which is when you damage someone else's, let's say your ox damages another ox. So when it comes to ki yigach, it gores. So you're actually liable. The Torah says, let's find it. In ki yigof shor isha chore'ehu, in the pasuk where we saw it, remember the whole thing we had of yigof yesterday? In Shabbos Daf, then it says, Machruat hashor hachai v'chatzuat kaspo. Okay, if it's a short time and you only pay half damages, what do we do? If my ox gored your ox and killed it, your ox, let's say, was worth $500, and my ox is worth $300. Now, no, is worth $200. Okay, your is a very expensive ox, and mine is only $200. Now, according to the pasuk, what do? We sell my ox that's still alive, $200 worth, and we pay half damages based on the value of my ox, not the ox that I damaged, but the value of my ox. That's called the shalem migufo. I don't have to pay any more than $200, even though theoretically I owe you $250 because your ox is worth, right, half of your ox is $250, but I don't have to pay any more than my shore is actually worth. Like there's some logic to that, right? That I shouldn't have to, if my possessions damage something else, well, I'm going to pay more than my possessions actually were. Obviously, there's arguments say the other way. What do you mean? It cost $250 worth of damage. We'll get into this whole thing, but that's the shalem gufo. The shalem aliyah means no. If my animal was only worth $200, okay, and I owe you $250 of half damages, I have to pay another $50 out of pocket. That's what it means. The shalem aliyah, the higher amount, okay. And Rashi adds, and I have to pay up for my best property, okay. That anyway we have to do. So now. That's why it's called the toladav regel. Because regel in the pasuk, if you remember, v'shilach biro bi'er b'ste'acher, which is regel, it says meitav sadeu meitav karma yishalem. You have to pay from the best. Now, all damages you have to pay from the best, but it said specifically by regel. So they say basically this idea that you have to pay the higher amount. Remember, in Karen it didn't say that. Karen, I only have to pay by the value of my animal, but regel I have to pay the whole amount, and therefore, because regel is also more expected, that's why I have to pay the full amount. And therefore, Shrorot has the same laws as regel in that sense. Now, the Gemara is going to ask a side question on this, which is the Hami Bai Rava, but Rava asked the question, to Bai Rava, Chatzin nezek Shrorot migufo mishalim or min aliyah mishalim, and he didn't know the answer. So why is it so obvious to you that it's similar to regel because it's min aliyah? But Rava wasn't even sure that was the case. So which they say, well, we're talking according to Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, right, one of the toladot or nakayot to them, which is a chatzin nezek Shrorot, which is a toladav regel. But we don't know that it's similar, that it's a toladav regel, according to Rabbi. He's not sure whether it's really similar to regel in that way or not. To which they answer, L'Rabba Mabayle, Rav Papa Pshitale. Well, Rabba wasn't sure, but Rav Papa was sure that it was a toladav regel. He was clear that it's Mishalem and Aliyah. To which the Gemara is going to say, even to Rabba, it was clear it was a toladav regel. So now they're going to say, L'Rabba de Mabayle, Amai Karile toladav regel. And now they're going to give a different reason why it's called toladav regel. Lipotra b'reshut harabim. Again, we're getting highlights of things we're going to see later, which is, also, regel, you're going to be exempt in the public domain. Okay, if someone left their item in the public domain and the animal trampled on it, well, everybody knows animals walk in the public domain, right? Nowadays, maybe less so, but in those days, animals walked in the public domain, that's their fault, right? If you leave something in the middle of the street today and a car runs over it, the car, right, the owner of the car is not responsible because that's obvious it was going to be there. Okay, now we're going to end with mav'e and hever. My mav'e, Rava Amar mav'e ze Adam, Shmuel Amar mav'e ze Shein. One thing in terms of the structure here, just to go over, maybe we'll just review the daf now and then finish the last part, which is we went through every single av, we explained what its source was, And then we explained what's the toladot, and then we said the toladot is the same until we finally got to chatzi nezek shorah. But the only one we didn't really discuss what the source is, well, two of them, Eish we didn't discuss either, but mav'e we didn't discuss. So we're going back to mav'e right now and saying, what is mav'e? And not only what is the source, but we know there's a machloket, so let's see what the machloket is. Rav says mav'e is adam, and Shmuel says mav'e is shein, is eating. Rav amar mav'e is adam dichtiv. Asher shomer ata boker v'gam layla. Amar shomer, sorry, ata boker v'gam layla. Im tivayum ba'ayo. Tivayum ba'ayo means if you seek to understand better, then here, you'll understand. Now, who understands things? Humans. That's the whole difference between humans and animals, and therefore mav'e, which comes from the same root, must be humans. Shmuel amar mav'e is shein. Dichtiv ech nichpesu esav niv'u matzpunav. Now, matzpunav is his hidden things. What's niv'u? So my mashma, how do you get niv'u is teeth? It's going to be the same as we said hagalal, which is something that's revealed. His secret or hiding places were revealed. My mashma, where do you get this from? Can Matargim Rav Yosef, as he says, okay, we're going to focus on these words. It was revealed, itgalim, legalot, matromayu, his hidden parts. So there you see, niv'u is hidden, something that's hidden, that's sometimes not hidden, which is teeth. So that's how we get it. Now we're going to ask Rav, my time alone, Mark Shmuel. Why didn't Rav hold like Shmuel? Amarle mikatane niv'e. Now they're going to get into grammar. They're going to say it doesn't say niv'e like niv'u, right? And it's, as it's said by Esav, it says mav'e. It's a different form of the word. Shmuel, my time alone, Mark Rav. To which he says, Amar lecha mikatane bo'e. It doesn't say bo'e as a active verb. It's passive. Mav'e. That's not the same either. So now the Gemara is going to say, Mifikra lo kamar daike, v'lo kamar daike. So each of them have grammatical problems with their interpretation. So my time alo amar kashmuel. So now we're going to go back and give another explanation. We're going to stop here, or maybe we'll just read one more line, which is Tana shor v'chol milei de shor. Okay, Rav basically didn't want to say like Shmuel for a very simple reason. And that's why I said in the beginning, the Mishna makes a lot more sense according to Rav. Because what does the Mishna say? Shor, which is Karen, Shane, and Regel, probably, right? All three shores. Then Bor, mav'e is Adam, and Hever is fire. And that makes perfect sense. That's why really Rav didn't agree with Shmuel, not really because of the linguistic issue. Then we're going to have to really explain, and that's why I don't want to start today, because we're going to see two big basic interpretations. Is how does Shmuel read these four avot nizikin? What is shor, right? If mav'e is shame, then what is shor? And why does the Mishnah read like this? It's a little bit strange. So that we're going to leave for tomorrow to figure out how does Shmuel read our Mishnah. Wishing everybody a good week, and hopefully better news this week.